Morning light brushes against the windows of Manhattan. I pour one cup of coffee, black, quiet, exact. My name is Michael Sloan. I count things that vanish when love grows too loud. Amber smiles at the doorway, bright as her empire. Without me, you won't last a week, she says. Her laughter stays on the marble after she leaves. It sounds almost kind, almost true. I sit alone watching the steam fade and decide to balance what can't be forgiven. If you're hearing this story, tell me in the comments. Where in the world are you listening from? Before we begin today's story, please don't forget to subscribe and hit the like button. Now let's get started. Part 1, Marble and Passwords. The crystal chandelier cast warm light across the private dining room. 24 guests filled the mahogany table. The anniversary dinner had been perfect so far. Michael Sloan adjusted his navy tie. He sat at the far end, watching his wife command the room. Amber's laugh echoed off the walls. Her diamond necklace caught the light with every gesture. 25 years, she announced, raising her champagne glass. Can you believe it? The guests applauded. Michael smiled politely. His hands rested flat on the white tablecloth. Amber's voice carried easily. You know what's funny? Michael used to handle million-dollar accounts. She paused for effect. Now he can barely balance our grocery budget. Soft laughter rippled through the room. Michael's smile never wavered. His fingers pressed against the fabric. I keep telling him, Amber continued, you couldn't survive a month without me. She winked at the mayor's wife. Seriously. Not even a week. The laughter grew louder. Michael reached for his water glass. The ice clinked softly as he took a sip. Michael's such a sweetheart, though, Amber said. Her tone shifted to mock tenderness. He organizes my files. Keeps track of my passwords. All those little details I'm too busy to remember. More chuckles. Michael set down his glass carefully. The condensation left a small ring on the tablecloth. Judge Harrison leaned forward. What did you do before the marriage, Michael? I was an accountant, Michael replied quietly. 15 years at Brennan & Associates. Oh, that's right, Amber said brightly. My little number cruncher. She reached over and patted his shoulder. So good with spreadsheets. The conversation moved on. Michael excused himself to the restroom. The hallway was quieter. He splashed cold water on his face and stared at his reflection. Gray hair, tired eyes, a face that used to close deals worth millions. When he returned, Amber was discussing her latest property acquisition. The Tribeca Tower, 47 floors, $300 million in revenue projected for next year. The permits alone took 6 months, she explained. But Michael helped organize all the paperwork. She smiled at him. Didn't you, honey? Yes, he said simply. After dinner, the guests moved to the terrace. Manhattan sparkled below them. Amber excused herself for a phone interview with Bloomberg. Something about tomorrow's board meeting. Michael lingered by the marble counter in their kitchen. The surface was polished to mirror brightness. He could see his reflection in it. Amber's Bentley key lay in a crystal dish. The mansion's security fob sat beside it. Her black American Express card rested in her purse, unzipped and careless. He picked up each item slowly. The key felt heavy in his palm. The fob was warm from the kitchen lights. The card's metal edge caught his fingerprint. Michael placed them in a neat line on the marble, perfectly aligned, like a balance sheet. From the study, he retrieved his old ThinkPad. The laptop was 7 years old but still worked perfectly. The small external drive was hidden behind his tax books. Amber had forgotten it existed. She never paid attention to the details. Michael opened the laptop on the kitchen counter. The screen's blue glow reflected off the marble. His fingers moved across the keyboard with practiced precision. The first password opened her business accounts. The second unlocked her personal files. The third gave him access to her investment portfolio. 10 years of tax records appeared on the screen. Every transaction, every deduction, every offshore account he had quietly managed while she built her empire. Michael pulled out his phone. The extended stay hotel on 42nd Street had availability. He booked a room under his LLC, Slate Analytics, the account Amber never knew about. The kitchen was silent except for the laptop's gentle humming. Michael scrolled through the files methodically. Each document told a story. Each number revealed a truth. Amber's laughter drifted from the terrace. She was still talking to Bloomberg, discussing her vision for the city's skyline. Michael closed the laptop and tucked it under his arm. The external drive went into his jacket pocket. He left everything else behind. The Bentley key remained on the marble. The security fob sat beside it. The black Amex card reflected the chandelier's light. He walked to the elevator. The marble floor echoed his footsteps. The security cameras tracked his movement, but they were programmed with his codes. The elevator doors closed silently. Michael stood in the hallway of the extended stay hotel. Room 1247. The carpet was beige and slightly worn. The walls were painted cream, a far cry from their penthouse. He set the laptop on the small desk by the window. The city lights twinkled beyond the glass. From here, he could see Amber's building in the distance. The laptop hummed to life again. Michael's fingers moved across the keyboard. File after file opened on the screen. Amber Sloan Real Estate Holdings, subsidiary accounts in 7 states. Offshore investments in the Cayman Islands. Tax shelters he had designed and implemented. All of it traceable. All of it documented. All of it accessible with the passwords she trusted him to remember. Michael leaned back in the hotel chair. It creaked slightly under his weight. The room was quiet except for the distant hum of traffic. He thought about dinner, about Amber's laughter, about 24 guests who had watched him swallow his pride like an unpaid invoice. "You said I couldn't live without you," he murmured to the empty room. His voice was barely above a whisper. The laptop screen illuminated his face. Numbers and accounts filled the display. 10 years of financial architecture. 10 years of careful planning. Michael's fingers hovered over the keyboard. One keystroke could freeze her accounts. Another could trigger an IRS audit. A third could expose the offshore shelters to federal investigators. He closed his eyes for a moment. When he opened them, his expression had changed. The tired resignation was gone. In its place was something sharper, more focused. Michael began to type. The first email went to the SEC, anonymous tip about irregular financial reporting. The second went to the IRS, questions about unreported offshore income. The third went to the New York Attorney General, concerns about tax avoidance schemes. Each message was carefully crafted, professional, detailed, impossible to ignore. Michael hit send on all 3 emails. The laptop chimed softly as they disappeared into cyberspace. He closed the laptop and walked to the window. The city stretched out below him. Amber's penthouse was just a glowing dot in the distance. His phone buzzed. A text message from Amber. "Where are you?" The interview ran long. "Bloomberg wants to do a follow-up tomorrow." Michael typed back slowly. "Had to step out. See you later." He set the phone on the nightstand and sat on the edge of the bed. The mattress was firm but comfortable. Nothing like the Italian memory foam at home. But this was his choice. His decision. His move. Michael smiled for the first time that evening. It was a different kind of smile. Quieter. More determined. Tomorrow, Amber would wake up to find her world slightly different. The calls would start around 9. Questions from auditors. Requests for documentation. Meetings she couldn't reschedule. And Michael would be here. In this small hotel room. With 10 years of her secrets stored on a laptop she had forgotten he owned. He opened the laptop one more time. The screen cast blue light across his face. His fingers moved across the keyboard with surgical precision. There were more files to examine, more documents to organize, more passwords to remember. Michael had work to do. The city hummed beyond his window. Traffic lights changed from red to green. People moved through the streets below, unaware that somewhere above them, a very patient man was about to prove his wife wrong. Very wrong indeed. Michael's internal clock woke him at 5:30. The hotel room was dark. He made instant coffee and opened the laptop on the small desk. Amber's corporate filings filled the screen. Sloan Real Estate Holdings. Subsidiary accounts in Delaware, Nevada, Wyoming. Michael scrolled through quarterly reports methodically. The numbers didn't add up. Revenue from the Tribeca project showed $47 million, but consultant disbursements totaled $63 million for the same period. Michael had never seen that line item before. He opened a spreadsheet. Each transaction went into columns. T, amount, receiving entity. The pattern emerged slowly. Every property acquisition was followed by consultant disbursements to offshore accounts. Cayman Islands, Switzerland, Luxembourg. Always within 30 days of closing. Michael remembered 3 years ago when Amber suggested separating their finances. "It's simpler this way," she had said. They sat in their penthouse kitchen, morning sunlight streaming through windows. "You handle your accounts. I handle mine." "But we've always shared everything," Michael had replied. "This is better for tax purposes. Trust me." The joint account closed the following week. Michael's name disappeared from her business accounts a month later. She called it streamlining bookkeeping. Now he understood why. The Metro North train to Stamford left at 8:15. Michael found a window seat, watching Connecticut suburbs roll past in autumn colors. The printed spreadsheet rested in his briefcase. 47 pages of suspicious transactions. Patricia Kim's law office occupied the 3rd floor of a colonial brick building. The waiting room smelled of leather and old books. "Mr. Sloan?" The receptionist smiled professionally. "Mrs. Wendell. Kim will see you now." Patricia Kim was younger than expected. maybe 45. Sharp gray suit, wire-rimmed glasses. Her handshake was firm and brief. "Thank you for seeing me," Michael said. "You mentioned tax compliance issues." She gestured to the chair across from her desk. Michael arranged the printed pages like evidence. "These are my wife's corporate filings. I've managed her accounts for 10 years. But these transactions don't make sense." Patricia studied the numbers quickly. Her jaw tightened slightly. "Consultant disbursements," she murmured. "Exactly. 63 million last quarter. But I can't find service agreements. No contracts. No invoices." Patricia looked at him directly. "How familiar are you with money laundering statutes?" "Enough to know this looks suspicious. If she's moving money through real estate transactions, follow the depreciation schedules. That's where the real story hides." "What should I look for?" "Properties bought at inflated prices. Immediate write-offs for improvements that never happened. Depreciation claims exceeding purchase prices." Patricia's voice was matter-of-fact. "Real estate is perfect because values are subjective. And if I find evidence, then your wife has bigger problems than a difficult marriage." Back in Manhattan, Michael pulled up property records for each building. Purchase prices, assessment values, improvement claims filed with the city. The picture was clear. The Tribeca Tower cost $87 million. Assessment value was $62 million. But improvement claims totaled $94 million, more than the building had cost. Similar patterns appeared everywhere. Purchase prices exceeding market value. Improvement claims defying logic. Depreciation schedules that would terrify auditors. Michael saved everything to the external drive, then copied files to 3 thumb drives. If this was money laundering, he needed insurance. The storage facility on the Lower East Side rented units monthly. Cash only. The clerk barely looked up as Michael signed paperwork under a false name. Unit 247 was small and windowless. A bare bulb provided light. Michael set up a folding table and arranged document boxes. The portable scanner worked efficiently. Each receipt, each contract, each filing. Michael worked until midnight, his back aching from bending over the machine. Meanwhile, Amber's world continued its polished rotation. The evening news featured her Bloomberg interview. She stood on the penthouse terrace, Manhattan glittering behind her. "Some people inherit wealth," she told the camera. "Others create it from nothing. I prefer the second approach." "Real estate is about vision," Amber continued. "Seeing potential where others see problems. Transform neighborhoods. Create value." The segment ran 8 minutes. Professional. Inspiring. Carefully edited. But online conversations were different. The Manhattan Real Estate blog posted a brief item that afternoon. Several major developers were facing routine audits this quarter. Comment sections told different stories. Anonymous posts questioned Amber's acquisition speed. Others wondered about financing. A few mentioned offshore investment rumors. Nothing concrete, just whispers in digital shadows. Michael read every comment twice. He bookmarked the blog and others covering commercial real estate. Information surfaced in unexpected places. The hotel's business center stayed open until 2 a.m. The night clerk, Derek, survived on energy drinks and YouTube videos. "You're here late again?" Derek observed as Michael approached the printer. "Work project," Michael replied simply. Derek didn't ask details. Guests printing hundreds of pages after midnight were usually lawyers or desperate. Either way, not his business. Michael fed paper methodically. Property deeds, tax filings, bank statements. Each page was evidence of patterns Amber thought hidden. The printer hummed steadily. Stack after stack accumulated. Michael organized them with decades of precision. By 2:30, he had printed everything. Evidence filled 2 cardboard boxes. Enough to bury careers. Enough to send someone to prison. Back in his room, Michael sat on the bed's edge. The boxes rested beside him. 10 years of marriage. 10 years of trust. 10 years believing his wife was exactly who she claimed. Evidence suggested otherwise. His phone buzzed. Text from Amber. "Working late again. Don't wait up." Michael stared at the message, then typed back. "No problem. Sleep well." He opened the laptop one more time. Blue light cast across tired features. His fingers hovered over the keyboard. More files needed examination. More patterns required uncovering. More lies demanded documentation. Michael began typing. Movements deliberate. Methodical. The same way he had balanced ledgers for 15 years at Brennan and Associates. But these numbers told different stories. These numbers revealed how a self-made billionaire actually made her fortune, and how she had hidden it from everyone who mattered. The city never slept beyond his window. Traffic moved in steady streams. People worked night shifts. Honest work for honest pay. Michael smiled grimly. He studied the screen. Columns of numbers stretched across the display, each one a thread in webs Amber had spent years weaving. But webs could be unraveled, especially when you knew exactly where to pull. Numbers don't lie, he whispered to the empty room, his voice barely audible above the laptop's humming. People do. The cursor blinked steadily. Michael's fingers moved across the keyboard again. There was still work to do. Outside, the city hummed its endless song, unaware that somewhere in a modest hotel room, a very patient man was learning exactly how much his wife had been lying, and exactly what he intended to do about it. The text arrived Thursday morning while Michael worked in the storage unit. His phone buzzed against the metal table. Dinner tomorrow. Westchester Country Club. Important investors. We should talk. Michael stared at the message. Amber never invited him to business dinners anymore. Something had changed. What time? He typed back. 7. Wear the blue suit? Friday evening, Michael drove north through Westchester County. Autumn leaves scattered across winding roads. The country club sat on a hill overlooking the Hudson River. Valet attendants took his keys. Michael straightened his blue tie and walked through mahogany doors. The private dining room buzzed with conversation. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over a table set for 12. Michael recognized faces from the real estate world. Others were strangers in expensive suits. Amber stood near windows, her black dress catching light. She spoke animatedly to a man with silver hair and a Swiss watch. When she saw Michael, her smile brightened. "There he is," she called out. "Everyone, my husband Michael." Polite nods around the room. Michael took his assigned seat at the far end. The place card read M. Sloan. Not Mr. Sloan. Just M. A young woman with purple hair sat across from him, adjusting a camera on a tripod. Her press badge read, "Finance Flow Live." "We're streaming tonight," she explained. "Amber's doing a special segment on real estate innovation." The camera's red light blinked steadily. Dinner began with wine selections and small talk. Michael chose water. Conversation flowed around him like he was furniture. Market trends, interest rates, new tax legislation. Amber commanded the table effortlessly. She discussed recent acquisitions with confidence. The Tribeca Tower was ahead of schedule. Queen's development exceeded projections. "It's all about vision," she told the camera. "Seeing opportunities where others see problems." Investors nodded approvingly. The man with the Swiss watch leaned forward. "What's your secret, Amber? How do you finance these rapid expansions?" "Discipline," she replied smoothly, "and excellent advisors." Her eyes found Michael briefly. "My husband used to help with financial planning. Until he... Well, attention to detail isn't everyone's strength." Soft laughter rippled around the table. Michael's fork paused halfway to his mouth. "Michael once misplaced $1 million in tax documentation," Amber continued. "We found it eventually, but it was quite the adventure." More laughter. The purple-haired streamer grinned as viewer count climbed on her laptop screen. Michael set down his fork carefully. His hands remained steady. "Actually," he said quietly, "I found where it went." Laughter died abruptly. Conversations paused. Amber's smile faltered before returning. "Oh, Michael." Her tone was playfully dismissive. "Always the accountant. The money went to a consulting company in the Cayman Islands." Michael continued conversationally. "Funny thing about consulting companies. They rarely provide actual services." The table went silent. The camera's red light blinked steadily. A man in a charcoal suit cleared his throat. He had sharp eyes of someone who lived in courtrooms. "I'm Richard Hayes," he said. "Ms. Sloan's attorney. You should be careful about accusations. Defamation can be expensive." Michael looked at him calmly. Under the table, his left hand moved to his smartwatch. A single tap activated recording. "So is fraud," Michael replied. The word hung in the air. Richard's jaw tightened. Amber's fingernails clicked against her wineglass. "Michael," she said, voice strained with forced patience, "perhaps we should discuss this privately." "I think we've had enough private discussions." Michael's tone remained pleasant. "Besides, your viewers might find this interesting." The streamer glanced nervously between camera and Amber. Viewer count had jumped to over 3,000. An older woman at the table's middle shifted uncomfortably. Margaret Flores had been Amber's bookkeeper for 15 years. Gray hair pulled back in a simple bun. Hands spotted with age. Margaret folded her napkin with deliberate precision. "The Tribeca acquisition was impressive," an investor said, steering conversation to safer ground. $87 million for that location was a steal. "Actually," Michael said, "it was overpriced by about $25 million. But that made the depreciation schedule more attractive." Richard leaned forward sharply. "Mr. Sloan, I strongly advise you to stop talking." "Why? I'm just discussing real estate valuations." Michael's smile was mild. Surely that's appropriate dinner conversation. Amber's face had gone pale beneath makeup. Michael, you're embarrassing yourself. Am I? I thought I was sharing interesting financial insights. The smartwatch recorded everything, every word, every threat, every nervous laugh from investors suddenly reconsidering their association with Amber Sloan. Margaret stood slowly. Excuse me, she murmured. I need the restroom. As she passed behind Michael's chair, something small dropped into his lap, a folded paper. Her movements were subtle. Even the camera didn't catch it. Michael palmed the paper without looking down. Perhaps we should order dessert, Amber said desperately. The chocolate souffle here is extraordinary. But the mood had shifted irreversibly. Conversations resumed in muted tones. Investors began checking phones. The man with the Swiss watch excused himself for a call. Michael unfolded the paper under the table. Margaret's handwriting was small and precise. Founders Trust, Cayman. Account number 7739. Check October wire transfers. He memorized the numbers and slipped the paper into his jacket pocket. The streamer wrapped up her segment. That's all for tonight's Finance Flow Live. Thanks for joining us for this illuminating discussion. She turned off the camera and packed equipment quickly. The red light disappeared. Amber stood and raised her wine glass. Her smile was brilliant and artificial. Before we end this lovely evening, she announced, I'd like to propose a toast. Remaining guests lifted glasses reluctantly. To husbands who can't keep up, Amber said, looking directly at Michael. And to those of us who leave them behind. She drank deeply. Investors mumbled polite agreement. Richard nodded approvingly. Michael lifted his water glass and took a small sip. His expression was serene. Because he wasn't behind. He was already 3 moves ahead. The evening dissolved into awkward farewells. Handshakes that lingered too briefly. Business cards that wouldn't be followed up. Michael waited until most guests left before standing. Michael. Amber's voice stopped him at the door. We need to talk. Yes, he agreed. We do. But not tonight. The drive back to Manhattan felt longer in darkness. Michael's mind processed Margaret's information. Founders Trust. Account number 7739, October wire transfers. Back in the hotel room, he opened the laptop immediately. Screen's glow filled the small space. His fingers moved with purpose. Cayman Islands banking regulations were relaxed, but they still required documentation for large transfers, especially recurring ones. Michael's access to Amber's accounts remained active. She had never revoked his permissions. An oversight about to prove costly. Founders Trust appeared exactly where Margaret said. Account number 7739, balance $47 million. Transaction history showed wire transfers every month for 2 years. Same amount, same day, same source companies. The pattern was perfect. Too perfect. He saved everything to the external drive and made backups. Then opened a new email. The message went to Patricia Kim. Subject, additional evidence. Michael attached banking records and account information. Added a single line. The web is bigger than we thought. He hit send and closed the laptop. The hotel room felt different now. Smaller. More temporary. Michael sat on the bed's edge and looked at city lights. Somewhere across town, Amber was probably having her own conversation with Richard Hayes. Planning damage control. Considering options. But Michael had spent 2 weeks preparing. Every document copied. Every transaction documented. Every password remembered. His phone buzzed. Text from Amber. That was unacceptable. Come home so we can discuss this properly. Michael stared at the message, then deleted it without responding. Home was where you felt safe. Valued. Like yourself. This hotel room felt more like home than their penthouse ever had. Michael turned off lights and lay on the narrow bed. The city hummed beyond his window. Traffic moved in endless streams. Somewhere above them, a very patient man had just won the first round of a war his wife didn't know she was fighting. But she would learn soon enough. The legal notice arrived Monday morning. Michael signed for the thick envelope at the hotel's front desk. His name was typed across expensive letterhead in bold black font. Eviction proceedings. Sloan versus Sloan. The papers were thorough. Immediate termination of residence. Freezing of all joint accounts. Restraining order, preventing access to shared assets. Effective immediately. Michael read each page twice in the lobby. The language was precise and unforgiving. Richard Hayes had crafted every sentence to inflict maximum damage. Amber's signature at the bottom was bold and confident. The same handwriting that had signed birthday cards for 25 years. The laptop displayed bank balances that now read 0 across the board. She had been efficient, complete, professional. The extended stay hotel accepted credit cards for another week. After that, Michael needed cash. He found both in Queens. The sublet was advertised on Craigslist. Studio apartment Astoria. Month to month. Cash only. The building was converted warehouse from the 1960s. Gray brick exterior. Windows that rattled when trucks passed below. Mrs. Chen showed him the apartment with minimal conversation. Silver hair and practical shoes. Third floor. No elevator. First month, last month deposit, she said in accented English. No parties. No pets. No trouble. Michael counted out $3,000 in cash from his forgotten savings account. No trouble, he agreed. The apartment smelled of industrial carpet and old paint. One room with a kitchenette, fold-out bed, and bathroom the size of a closet. A single window faced east toward Manhattan's skyline. From here, the city looked different. Smaller. More manageable. Michael bought supplies at the hardware store. Pushpins. String. Poster board. The elderly clerk rang up the purchase without questions. The wall opposite the window became his command center. Property deeds on the left. Bank records in the middle. Corporate filings on the right. Red string connected related documents. Blue string showed money flows. Within a week, the apartment looked like a detective's evidence room. Thursday morning brought the first news coverage. Michael's phone buzzed with a news alert. Sloan Real Estate Empire under federal investigation. The article was brief but devastating. Anonymous sources claimed irregularities in property acquisitions. The IRS had opened formal audit. The Manhattan DA was reviewing potential criminal charges. Michael searched for additional coverage. Bloomberg, Wall Street Journal, Real Estate Weekly. Each article mentioned Amber's rapid expansion and unconventional financing methods. None mentioned Michael by name. Yet, that changed Friday afternoon. The press conference aired live on NY1. Amber stood behind a podium at her attorney's office, surrounded by microphones and cameras. Navy suit that projected competence and control. These allegations are completely unfounded, she began. My company has always operated within full compliance. A reporter raised her hand. Can you comment on the federal investigation? This appears to be a politically motivated witch hunt. Successful women in real estate face additional scrutiny. Another reporter pressed further. Sources suggest irregularities in your tax filings. Amber's expression hardened. Those irregularities, if they exist, stem from clerical errors by my former financial advisor. My estranged husband, Michael Sloan. The words hit Michael like physical blows. He sat in his small apartment, watching his wife destroy his reputation on live television. Mr. Sloan handled our tax documentation for several years. Unfortunately, his attention to detail declined significantly. Are you suggesting your husband is responsible for any violations? I'm suggesting that when you trust someone with complex responsibilities, you expect professional competence. Sometimes that trust is misplaced. Michael turned off the laptop and sat in silence. Outside, Queens traffic moved in steady streams. His phone rang. Patricia Kim's number. Did you watch what she asked without preamble? Yes. She's setting you up as the fall guy. Textbook misdirection. What happens now? They'll issue a subpoena within the week. She's claiming you embezzled through incorrect filings. But I have evidence of her offshore accounts. Evidence obtained through questionable means. They'll argue you falsified records to cover your crimes. So what do? Fight with math, not emotion. Build an airtight case with documentation they can't challenge. The subpoena arrived Tuesday. Michael signed for it at Mrs. Chen's front desk. She handed him the envelope with disapproving frown. Federal court. You have trouble? I hope not. Back in his apartment, he read the document carefully. Required to appear before federal grand jury in 2 weeks. Conspiracy to commit tax fraud. Money laundering. Wire fraud. Potential prison sentence 15 to 20 years. Michael stared at the wall of evidence. Red and blue strings connected dozens of documents. The pattern was clear to him. But would it be clear to a jury? His phone buzzed. Text from unknown number. Can we meet? Tonight? 8 p.m. Queens Public Library on Northern Boulevard. Mampton. F. Margaret Flores, Amber's bookkeeper. Michael arrived early. The library was modern brick and glass filled with quiet hum of people studying. Margaret sat at a corner table, surrounded by books she wasn't reading. She looked older than at the dinner party. More fragile. Gray hair loose around her shoulders. Thank you for coming, she said quietly. Why did you want to see me? Margaret glanced around nervously. Teenagers doing homework 3 tables away. I've worked for Amber 15 years. I've seen things. Done things I'm not proud of. She reached into her purse and pulled out a small cloth bag. 3 flash drives inside, each labeled with dates spanning 5 years. These are copies from our office archives. Emails. Audio recordings. Documents Amber thinks were destroyed. Michael's pulse quickened. What kind of recordings? Conference calls with investors. Instructions to staff. Conversations with offshore account managers. She recorded everything for protection. Never thought someone else might copy the files. Why are you doing this? Margaret was quiet for a moment. I have grandchildren. I want them to be proud of their grandmother. She slid the bag across the table. There's something else. On the third drive. Recordings from last month. What kind? Amber instructing staff to forge invoices for work never done. To create paper trails for money going to Cayman accounts. She calls it optimization. Michael pocketed the drives carefully. Will you testify if needed? I can't. I'd lose my pension, health insurance. But those recordings speak for themselves. She walked away without looking back, disappearing between library shelves like a ghost carrying 15 years of secrets. Back in his apartment, Michael inserted the first flash drive. Hundreds of documents, dozens of audio recordings organized by date and type. He started with recent files. Audio from October, weeks before the anniversary dinner. Amber's voice filled the apartment through laptop speakers. She was addressing someone named David, a staff accountant. The Tribeca invoices need to be adjusted. Increase the consulting fees by 40%. Make sure dates align with wire transfers. David's voice was uncertain, but there weren't any consulting services for those amounts. There were. The consultants worked remotely. Very specialized work requiring offshore expertise. Amber, I'm not comfortable with this. Her voice hardened. David, this is financial optimization. Every successful company uses these strategies. If you can't handle sophisticated accounting, I can find someone who can. Pause. Then David's resigned voice. I'll adjust the invoices. Good. And David, this conversation never happened. Michael played the recording 3 times. Each repetition made the words clearer. More damning. The second drive contained more recordings. More instructions. More evidence of systematic fraud spanning 5 years. The third drive held the most recent files. Conversations from last week, after news broke about the federal investigation. Richard, we need to control the narrative, Amber's voice said. She was speaking to her attorney. Michael becomes the scapegoat. He handled the filings. He had access to everything. The evidence might not support that theory, Richard replied carefully. Then we create evidence that does. Modified files. Amended records. His signature on documents he never saw. Amber, that's business. I didn't build a billion-dollar empire by playing fair. Michael stopped the recording and sat back. The apartment felt smaller suddenly. Walls seemed to press closer. For 25 years, he had shared a bed with someone he never really knew. For 25 years, he had trusted someone who viewed trust as weakness. He played the recording again. Then again. Each time, Amber's voice grew clearer. More real. More damning. I didn't build a billion-dollar empire by playing fair. Michael closed his eyes and thought about the federal subpoena, about the grand jury, about 15 to 20 years in prison for crimes someone else had committed. But he also thought about the flash drives, about Margaret's courage, about Patricia's advice to fight with math instead of emotion. He opened his eyes and looked at the wall of evidence, red and blue strings connecting dozens of documents, the pattern that told the real story. Michael plugged in headphones and played the recordings again. Amber's voice spoke directly into his ears now. Intimate and damning. This is financial optimization. This conversation never happened. I didn't build a billion-dollar empire by playing fair. He listened for 3 hours. Each recording revealed new layers of deception. Each conversation showed deeper levels of fraud. Finally, near midnight, Michael removed the headphones and spoke to the empty apartment. Optimization ends tonight, he whispered. His voice was calm, determined, different than it had been even hours earlier. Because now he knew exactly who his wife really was, and exactly what he needed to do about it. The city hummed beyond his window. Traffic moved in endless streams. People lived their lives unaware that somewhere above them, a very patient man had just found the weapon that would end his war, and he knew exactly how to use it. The photograph was yellowed at the edges. Michael found it in his old briefcase. Amber stood beside him outside their first office. She wore a simple blue dress. Her smile was genuine then. Sloan Financial Consulting. 2 rooms above a bakery. June 1998. Amber had secured her first real estate investment trust. $3 million in assets. She needed someone for accounting. Someone willing to work for equity. We build together, she had said. Equal partners. Michael had believed her. He spent 3 months setting up the fund structure for free. But something nagged at him. A detail that had bothered him for years. He searched through digital files on his laptop. Marriage records. The prenuptial agreement. The original prenup had been simple. Standard asset protection language. But there had been amendments. Modifications filed months after the wedding. Section 4.7 made his stomach tighten. In the event that Michael Sloan abandons the marriage, all shared assets revert to Amber Sloan exclusively. His signature appeared at the bottom. But Michael had no memory of signing this document. The notarization stamp was dated October 15th, 2000, a Sunday. Michael checked online calendars. October 15th had been a Sunday. Notary offices were closed. No legitimate notarization could have happened that day. He called Patricia Kim. Document forgery. Felony level important. Patricia studied the prenup amendment with a magnifying glass. The signature looks authentic. But Sunday notarizations are impossible unless it's a medical emergency with court orders. So it's forged? The notarization is fraudulent. This voids the entire prenup. They crafted an affidavit of forgery. Each paragraph was precise and factual. Mathematical proof that the document was invalid. Patricia filed it electronically with the federal court. The document was now part of the official record. Now we build the rest of your case. His phone buzzed. Text from Margaret Flores. Can we meet? I have more to show you. They met at the Elmhurst Library. Margaret sat with 3 cardboard boxes. 30 years of ledgers, she said. Everything I kept is backup records. The boxes contained hundreds of manila folders organized by year and property. Handwritten notes in Margaret's precise script. I marked the suspicious ones with red tabs. Depreciation claims exceeding purchase prices. Invoices for work never done. Payments to consulting companies that don't exist. Red tabs were everywhere. Every major transaction had irregularities. They spent 3 hours going through boxes. Michael photographed key documents. Margaret explained patterns. Fake invoices always came in round numbers. 10,000, 25,000, 50,000. Consulting companies rotated names but used the same addresses. Post office boxes in countries with banking secrecy laws. Depreciation schedules defied logic. Buildings costing $60 million were depreciated as if they cost $90 million. She calls it financial optimization, Margaret said. But I know what it really is. That evening, they met at an internet cafe in Flushing. Old computers, but functional. They organized evidence into a comprehensive dossier. Financial records, audio recordings, forged documents, 30 years of fraudulent transactions. Margaret brought a portable scanner. Each document was digitized and encrypted. Each piece was tagged and cross-referenced. The dossier grew to 800 pages. Charts showing money flows, timelines of suspicious transactions, detailed analysis of every forged invoice. Michael titled it Project Clean Slate. The SEC whistleblower portal required multiple security layers. Michael decided to use his real name, real contact information. The upload process took 20 minutes. 800 pages of evidence. 3 hours of audio recordings. Systematic fraud over 3 decades. The progress bar moved slowly. 5%, 10%, 25%. Margaret watched nervously. Are you sure? Yes. 50%, 75%, 90%. The cafe was nearly empty. The coffee was bitter and cold. But the evidence was clean, complete, unassailable. 100%. Upload complete. The portal generated a confirmation number. The dossier was now in federal investigators' hands, beyond Amber's reach. Michael logged out and cleared the browser history. Margaret packed her papers. They walked out together. The street was quiet. The city felt different somehow. Cleaner. What happens now? Margaret asked. Now we wait. She walked toward the subway. He walked toward the bus stop. 2 people who had finally found courage to stop enabling fraud. Michael's apartment felt different when he returned. The wall of evidence looked smaller. The real evidence was already in motion. He sat on his fold-out bed and looked at the photograph again. Amber in her blue dress, young and hopeful. But she had built something else instead. A criminal empire disguised as legitimate business. Michael set the photograph in a drawer. Some memories were too painful to keep visible. The laptop screen showed the SEC confirmation number. A simple string of digits representing years of patient work. Years of waiting for the right moment to act. That moment had finally arrived. Outside, Queens hummed with honest late-night activity. Delivery drivers. Night shift workers. People earning honest wages. Michael turned off the lights and lay down. Tomorrow would bring investigators, prosecutors, testimony that would end his marriage and possibly send his wife to prison. But tonight he slept peacefully. The weight of 30 years of secrets was finally off his shoulders. The simple progress bar had replaced years of silence. And silence, Michael had learned, was just another word for complicity. Michael's phone buzzed at 6:17 in the morning. He was already awake, sitting by the small window in his Queens apartment. The city was just beginning to stir. Early commuters moved through gray streets toward subway stations. The call was from an unknown number. Michael answered carefully. Mr. Sloan? This is Agent Sarah Chen from the SEC. We received your whistleblower submission. We'd like to schedule an interview as soon as possible. Michael's pulse quickened. How soon? This morning, if you're available. We're executing search warrants today. Your timing was perfect. Michael dressed quickly in his blue suit, the same one Amber had told him to wear to the Westchester dinner. But today it felt different, like armor instead of costume. The subway ride to Manhattan took 45 minutes. Michael sat quietly, watching the city wake up around him. Construction workers heading to job sites, office workers clutching coffee cups, people living honest lives for honest wages. At 8:30, his phone buzzed again. This time it was a news alert. Breaking federal agents raid Sloan Real Estate headquarters. Michael opened the news app. The lead story showed federal agents carrying boxes out of Amber's Midtown office building. She had built her empire on the 40th floor, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park. Now those windows were covered with federal search warrants. The video showed agents in dark suits moving efficiently through the lobby. Some carried laptops. Others wheeled filing cabinets on dollies. Everything was being seized. Everything was evidence now. Michael called Patricia Kim. Are you watching the news? He asked. I'm watching CNBC right now. It's beautiful. The SEC office on Broadway was buzzing with activity. Agent Chen was younger than Michael had expected. Maybe 35. Sharp suit. Confident handshake. She led him to a conference room overlooking the financial district. Your submission was remarkable, she began. 800 pages of evidence, audio recordings, financial documentation going back 30 years. This is one of the most comprehensive whistleblower files we've ever received. What happens now? Now we build the case. We'll need your full cooperation, testimony, document authentication, expert analysis of the financial patterns you identified. They spent 3 hours going through the evidence. Agent Chen asked detailed questions about each transaction, each forged invoice, each fraudulent depreciation claim. Michael answered everything with the precision of someone who had lived with these numbers for decades. At noon, his phone rang. Richard Hayes, Amber's attorney. Michael excused himself and stepped into the hallway. Michael, we need to talk, Richard's voice was strained. Amber wants to settle this privately, before things get out of hand. Michael looked through the conference room window. Agent Chen was studying financial charts spread across the table. 3 decades of fraud laid out in neat columns and rows. She should have thought of private before she went public, Michael replied quietly. This doesn't have to destroy both of you. We can work something out. Financial compensation. Immunity from prosecution. A clean divorce. I'm not the one who needs immunity, Richard. Michael, be reasonable. She's willing to make this worth your while. She already did. Every forged document, every fraudulent filing, every lie she told to federal investigators. She made it very worth my while. Michael hung up and returned to the conference room. By 3 o'clock, the story was leading every financial news channel. CNBC ran continuous coverage. Bloomberg had a special report. The Wall Street Journal posted updates every hour. Sloan Real Estate Empire under federal investigation. Billion-dollar real estate fraud alleged. Self-made billionaire faces federal charges. The photos were devastating. Amber's corporate headshot appeared beside police tape and federal search warrants. Her face, once on magazine covers celebrating female entrepreneurs, now illustrated articles about white-collar crime. Michael returned to Queens that evening feeling strangely empty. The moment he had worked toward for months had finally arrived. But instead of satisfaction, he felt something closer to exhaustion. His apartment looked different somehow. The wall of evidence seemed smaller. Less important. The real evidence was now in federal hands, protected by law, beyond anyone's ability to destroy or suppress. The evening news provided more details. Federal agents had seized over 2 million documents, 12 computers, 4 servers containing email archives dating back 15 years. The investigation was expected to take months. Margaret Flores was interviewed outside the building where she had worked for 30 years. Her gray hair was neat. Her expression was calm. She looked directly into the camera. I have no comment on the ongoing investigation, she said simply, but I can confirm that I have officially retired as of today. The reporter pressed for more details. Can you tell us about the working conditions at Sloan Real Estate? I can tell you that I will be receiving my final paycheck from the federal government's whistleblower program. That should tell you everything you need to know. Margaret walked away without answering additional questions. 30 years of faithful service. 30 years of watching fraud happen around her. 30 years of keeping detailed records that had finally found their purpose. Michael's phone buzzed. Text from Patricia Kim. Turn on Channel 7. You need to see this. The evening news was running a special report on corporate fraud in New York real estate. The anchor introduced the segment with professional gravity. Tonight, we examine the case of Amber Sloan, once celebrated as a self-made billionaire, now facing federal charges that could result in decades in prison. The report was thorough. It outlined the alleged fraud schemes, the offshore accounts, the forged documents, the systematic tax evasion spanning 3 decades. But the most devastating footage came at the end. Amber was leaving the federal building in Lower Manhattan. She was flanked by attorneys and federal marshals. Her navy suit was perfectly pressed. Her hair was styled immaculately. She still looked like a successful businesswoman, but something in her face had changed. The confidence was gone. The commanding presence that had filled boardrooms and television studios had evaporated. She looked smaller somehow, more fragile. As she approached the waiting car, reporters shouted questions. Mr. Wata. Sloan, do you have any comment on the charges? Will you be pleading guilty? What do you say to investors who trusted you with their money? Amber paused at the car door. For a moment, she looked directly into the camera. Her smile was automatic, professional, the same smile she had worn at charity galas and business conferences. But her eyes were different, frightened, desperate. The eyes of someone who had built an empire on lies and was watching it crumble in real time. She got into the car without speaking. The vehicle pulled away from the curb and disappeared into Manhattan traffic. Michael turned off the television and sat in silence. The apartment felt larger now, more permanent, like a place where someone could actually live instead of just hide. His phone rang. Patricia Kim again. Did you watch? Yes. That's what legal revenge looks like, Patricia said with satisfaction. 30 years of fraud, hundreds of millions in stolen taxes. She'll be lucky to see the outside of a federal prison before she's 80. How long will the trial take? If she pleads guilty, maybe 6 months. If she fights it, could be 2 years. But with the evidence you provided, there's no defense. She's done. After Patricia hung up, Michael sat by his window, watching the city. Traffic moved in steady streams below. People returning home from honest work. Families gathering for dinner. The ordinary rhythm of ordinary lives. For the first time in months, Michael felt like he belonged to that rhythm again. Like he was part of the honest world instead of the criminal one. His phone buzzed one more time. A news alert. Amber Sloan released on $5 million bond. Michael clicked on the article. The details were brief. Amber had posted bail using property she owned in the Hamptons. She was required to surrender her passport. She was forbidden from traveling outside New York State. The article included a quote from Richard Hayes. Mr. Wata. Sloan maintains her innocence and looks forward to clearing her name in court. But there was another detail that caught Michael's attention. Amber had been required to provide a local address where she could be reached. The address listed was not their penthouse. It was a small hotel in Midtown, the same chain where Michael had lived for weeks after she threw him out. She was homeless now, cut off from her accounts, living on borrowed money, sleeping in a place that charged by the night instead of owning buildings that generated millions in rent. Michael closed the article and looked out at the city lights. Somewhere across the river, Amber was probably sitting in a hotel room much like his own. Smaller than she was used to, cheaper than she preferred, more honest than she deserved. But still, for the first time since this began, Michael felt something approaching pity. Not for the crime, not for the fraud, not for the decades of lies and stolen money, but for the woman who had once stood beside him in a blue dress, dreaming of building something together, before she decided to build something criminal instead. The city hummed beyond his window. Traffic lights changed from red to green. People moved through their lives unaware that somewhere above them, a very patient man had finally won a war that had taken 30 years to fight. Michael spoke to the empty room. His voice was quiet. Final. Now you'll know what surviving without me feels like. The words hung in the air for a moment, then faded into the gentle hum of honest life continuing all around him. Outside, the city kept moving. Inside, Michael finally felt like he could rest. The war was over. Justice was in motion. And for the first time in decades, the numbers finally added up correctly. The federal courthouse in Lower Manhattan stood like a granite monument to justice. Michael climbed the stone steps at 9:15 on a Tuesday morning. His blue suit was pressed. His tie was straight. His briefcase contained documents that would change everything. The courtroom smelled of old wood and fresh coffee. Judge Helen Morrison presided from the bench with silver hair and sharp eyes. She had spent 30 years hearing white-collar crime cases. Her reputation was unforgiving. Amber sat at the defendant's table wearing orange prison clothes. No jewelry, no makeup. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail. The transformation was complete. Billionaire to federal prisoner in 8 months. Michael took his seat in the gallery. Patricia Kim sat beside him, reviewing notes on a legal pad. The settlement hearing was scheduled to last 2 hours. But some decisions took longer to reach than others. All rise, the bailiff announced, the Honorable Judge Morrison presiding. Judge Morrison reviewed the case files methodically. The forged prenup, the fraudulent notarization, systematic tax evasion spanning 3 decades. Each violation carried its own penalty. Together, they painted a picture of criminal enterprise. Mrs. Sloan, Judge Morrison began, you have pleaded guilty to conspiracy, tax fraud, and money laundering. Before sentencing, the court must address the civil matter of asset division. Richard Hayes stood slowly. He looked older than he had at the Westchester dinner. Thinner. More cautious. Your Honor, my client acknowledges the fraudulent nature of the prenuptial amendment. She waives all claims to assets acquired during the marriage. Judge Morrison nodded. Mr. Sloan, you are entitled to half of all marital assets under New York state law. The forged prenup is void. How do you wish to proceed? Michael stood when Patricia nudged him. His legs felt unsteady. After 30 years of marriage, this moment should have felt like victory. Instead, it felt like surgery. Your Honor, I accept the court's ruling. The asset division will proceed immediately. Mr. Sloan will receive 50% of all real estate holdings, investment accounts, and business interests acquired during the marriage. The numbers were staggering. $47 million in real estate, $23 million in investment accounts, $12 million in business equity. Michael's share totaled $41 million. More money than he had ever imagined possessing. More money than most people saw in lifetimes. But it felt hollow somehow. Like compensation for wounds that money couldn't heal. Judge Morrison turned to sentencing. Mrs. Sloan, you have systematically defrauded the United States government for 30 years. You have stolen millions in tax revenue. You have corrupted business relationships and violated public trust. Amber stood slowly. Her orange jumpsuit was too large. It made her look smaller, more fragile. Your Honor, I accept full responsibility for my actions. I ask for the court's mercy. I have lost everything that mattered to me. Judge Morrison's expression remained neutral. Mrs. Sloan, integrity has compound interest. Every honest decision builds on the last. Every dishonest choice compounds the damage. You chose to compound fraud for 3 decades. Yes, Your Honor. The court sentences you to 15 years in federal prison. You will serve a minimum of 12 years before parole consideration. You will perform 500 hours of community service upon release. The gavel fell with finality. Amber's shoulders sagged. Richard Hayes placed a steadying hand on her arm. Michael felt no satisfaction, no relief, just exhaustion that reached his bones. Outside the courthouse, reporters waited with cameras and microphones. Michael had expected this. He walked down the steps carefully, Patricia beside him for moral support. Mr. Sloan, how do you feel about the verdict? What will you do with your settlement money? Do you have any message for your ex-wife? Michael paused at the bottom of the steps. The questions came from all directions. Cameras flashed continuously. The attention felt uncomfortable after months of anonymity. I have no comment on Mrs. Sloan's sentence. The court has spoken. What about the money, Mr. Sloan? $41 million is a substantial settlement. Michael looked directly into the nearest camera. The math speaks. He walked away without answering additional questions. The reporters followed for half a block before giving up. Michael and Patricia found a quiet coffee shop 3 blocks from the courthouse. How do you feel? Patricia asked over steaming cups. Empty, Michael replied honestly. That's normal. 30 years of lies don't disappear overnight. Michael stirred his coffee thoughtfully. I want to do something useful with the money. What did you have in mind? Free tax preparation for seniors. Too many elderly people get taken advantage of by unscrupulous preparers. They need honest help. Patricia smiled. That sounds perfect. 6 weeks later, Michael signed the incorporation papers for Clear Ledger Foundation. The office was located in Astoria, Queens, 3 blocks from his apartment, walking distance to honest work. The foundation offered free tax preparation services for senior citizens. Volunteer accountants donated their time. The foundation provided training, software, and oversight. Margaret Flores was the first volunteer. She arrived on opening day wearing a simple blue dress and practical shoes. Her bookkeeping skills were invaluable. Her institutional knowledge was irreplaceable. 30 years of watching fraud, she told Michael. Time to spend 30 years preventing it. Patricia joined the board as legal counsel. She donated her services and helped navigate nonprofit regulations. The foundation grew quickly. Word spread through senior centers and community organizations. The local newspaper ran a feature story. Former Sloan accountant starts foundation for seniors. The article was respectful and brief. It focused on the foundation's mission rather than Michael's personal story. National media picked up the story. Financial magazines wrote about corporate whistleblowers who used settlement money for charity. Business schools discussed the case in ethics courses. But Michael declined all interview requests. The same two words every time. The math speaks. 3 months after opening, the foundation had prepared over 500 tax returns. Average savings per senior, $1,200. Money that stayed in their pockets instead of going to predatory preparers. Michael worked 12-hour days. He reviewed every return personally. He trained new volunteers. He answered questions about tax law and proper procedures. The work felt meaningful. Each honest tax return was a small victory against fraud and deception. One Thursday afternoon, Michael walked to the courthouse for a foundation meeting with city officials. The meeting went well. The city offered additional grant funding for expanded services. As he left the building, Michael noticed someone sweeping the front steps. Orange vest, simple broom, community service uniform. It was Amber. She looked up as he approached. Her face was thinner. Her hands were rough from manual labor. Prison had aged her more than the years suggested. They stood 3 feet apart. Former spouses, former partners, former everything. "Hello, Michael," she said quietly. "Amber." She leaned on the broom handle. "I heard about your foundation. It sounds wonderful." Michael nodded. "People need honest help. I'm sorry. For everything. For all of it." Her apology hung in the air between them. Sincere but insufficient. Some damages couldn't be repaired with words. Michael looked at her orange vest, at her work-worn hands, at the broom that represented her fall from billionaire to public servant. "Keep the chain, Chitinane," he said simply. He walked past her down the courthouse steps. His footsteps were steady and sure. Behind him, he heard a soft clatter. The broom had slipped from her hands and fallen to the concrete, but Michael's steps didn't falter. He continued down the street toward the subway station, toward his apartment in Queens, toward his honest work helping honest people. The city hummed around him. Traffic moved in familiar patterns. People lived their lives unaware that they had witnessed the end of a 30-year story about love, betrayal, and the mathematics of justice. Michael descended into the subway. The train would take him back to Queens, back to his small apartment, back to his purposeful life. For the first time in decades, the numbers finally balanced. The books were clean. The ledger was clear. And justice, as Judge Morrison had noted, did indeed have compound interest. Outside, autumn leaves swirled around the courthouse steps. The broom lay where it had fallen. But the man who had once trusted too much and learned too late was already moving toward tomorrow. Moving toward a future where every number told the truth. Spring sunlight filtered through tall windows of the Brooklyn Community Center. The classroom smelled of fresh coffee and photocopied handouts. 12 senior citizens sat in folding chairs arranged in a semicircle around Michael's desk. "Good morning, everyone," Michael began. "Today we're learning to spot red flags in family finances." He wore a simple navy sweater and khaki pants. No expensive suits anymore. No gold cufflinks. Just comfortable clothes for honest work. "Mrs. Chen raised her arthritic hand. "My grandson keeps asking about my bank account numbers." "That's exactly what we're here to discuss," Michael replied gently. He turned to the whiteboard and wrote 3 statistics. Financial elder abuse affects 1 in 10 seniors. 73% of cases involve family members. Average loss is $35,000. The room grew quiet. These numbers represented their greatest fears. Children who stopped visiting unless they needed money. Grandchildren who showed sudden interest in wills and bank statements. Michael distributed sample bank statements with names blacked out. "These are real examples from our files. Look for patterns, Mr." William studied his handout carefully. This person had the same large withdrawal every month. Excellent observation. The victim was 81 years old. Her daughter had power of attorney and was transferring money to her own account. He spent the next hour explaining warning signs, sudden changes in banking habits, new names on accounts, children who discouraged independence or isolated parents from friends. "Trust your instincts," Michael emphasized. If something feels wrong, investigate. At the back of the room, Margaret Flores took notes. She volunteered at every session now. Her gray hair was neatly pinned back. Her cardigan was simple but clean. At 74, she moved more slowly than before, but her mind remained sharp. During the break, students approached Michael individually. Mrs. Rodriguez showed him concerning bank statements. Mr. Kim asked about protecting his pension from relatives with gambling problems. Each conversation was private, confidential. Michael listened carefully and offered practical solutions. Sometimes the answer was simple account monitoring. Sometimes it required legal intervention. You saved my house, Mrs. Chen told him quietly. My grandson was forging checks. I never would have caught it without your classes. Michael felt the familiar warmth of meaningful work. Each person he helped was a small victory against fraud and exploitation. After students left, Margaret approached his desk. Another good session. These people deserve protection from their own families. Margaret smiled. You know what I think you've done? What's that? You turned revenge into accounting. Michael laughed softly. It was a sound Margaret hadn't heard in over a year. Same thing, adding up what's owed. They cleaned the classroom together, folding chairs, erasing the whiteboard, organizing materials for next week. The routine had become comfortable, purposeful. On the wall behind Michael's desk hung a framed quote in simple black letters. Integrity is the only asset no one can repossess. He had found it at a thrift store in Queens. The frame was scratched and the glass was cloudy, but the words remained true. Margaret noticed him looking at the quote. Do you really believe that? More every day. She nodded approvingly. Integrity compounds like interest. Every honest choice makes the next one easier, and every dishonest choice makes honesty harder. They finished cleaning in comfortable silence. The community center would close soon. Other classes were ending. Senior Tai Chi, basic computer skills. English conversation for immigrants. Michael walked Margaret to the subway station. Brooklyn streets buzzed with afternoon activity. School children heading home. Workers ending their shifts. The honest rhythm of ordinary life. Same time Thursday? Margaret asked at the station entrance. Same time. She disappeared down the steps. Michael returned to retrieve his forgotten briefcase from the classroom. The building was quieter now. His footsteps echoed in empty hallways as he walked back to his room. Inside, he gathered remaining handouts and notes. His briefcase was old leather bought at a thrift store. Nothing like the expensive case from his corporate days, but it served the same purpose. As he prepared to leave, Michael noticed the small television in the corner. Someone had left it on with low volume. The evening news was beginning. The lead story caught his attention. Former real estate mogul testifies before Congress. Michael paused. He had avoided news coverage of Amber for months. But something compelled him to watch. The footage showed a congressional hearing room. Amber sat at a witness table wearing orange prison clothes. Her hair was shorter now. Gray roots showed where expensive coloring had once hidden them. She was testifying about ethics reform in real estate. Her community service had been extended to include educational appearances before government committees. Financial fraud causes immeasurable damage, her voice said from the speakers. Not just to victims, but to families, to communities, to the basic trust that makes business possible. The irony was staggering. The woman who had committed fraud for 30 years was now the poster child for preventing it. But as Michael watched, he felt something unexpected. Not anger, not satisfaction, just profound sadness for the waste of it all. Michael turned off the television and picked up his briefcase. The past was fixed, unchangeable, but the future remained unwritten. He walked through the empty community center toward the exit. His footsteps echoed off polished floors that smelled of disinfectant and honest labor. Outside, spring evening light filtered through Brooklyn's tree-lined streets. The air was warm and clean, no hint of industrial pollution or urban decay. Michael walked slowly toward the subway. He was in no hurry. His Queens apartment waited. Dinner would be simple, perhaps some reading before bed. Tomorrow would bring another day at the foundation. More tax returns to review. More seniors to protect from financial predators. More small victories against exploitation and fraud. At the subway entrance, Michael paused and looked back toward the community center. Light spilled from windows where other classes continued. People learning, growing, improving their lives in small but significant ways. He thought about Mrs. Chen and her saved house, about Mr. Kim and his protected pension, about dozens of other seniors who now knew how to spot financial predators. Each person helped was a deposit in the account of human dignity. Each scam prevented was a withdrawal from the ledger of suffering. Michael descended into the subway. The train would carry him home to Queens. to his small apartment with one window facing east, to his quiet life of honest purpose. As the train pulled away, he opened his briefcase and reviewed notes from today's class. Tomorrow he would prepare new handouts, develop fresh examples, find new ways to protect vulnerable people. The work would continue. The mission would expand. The ledger would grow more balanced each day. Michael closed his briefcase and leaned back in the subway seat. Outside the windows, Brooklyn neighborhoods flashed past in gathering dusk. Honest people in honest homes living honest lives. He opened the foundation's ledger one final time. Numbers filled neat columns. Revenue, expenses, people helped, money saved, lives protected. The mathematics were simple, clear, honest. Michael closed the ledger and whispered two words to the empty train car. Account settled. The train carried him home through the spring evening. Behind him, the city continued its endless rhythm of dreams and disappointments, victories and defeats. But for Michael Sloan, former corporate accountant turned protector of senior citizens, the books were finally balanced. The numbers finally added up. And that, he had learned, was the only mathematics that truly mattered.